Buonasera a tutti. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabriella Maletti, and I am the Director of Special Programs at the National Italian American Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we present to you Your Italian Passport, the 1948 Law Seeking Dual Citizenship through the Tribunal in Rome. Please note that all attendees are muted and have their videos and chats turned off. During this webinar, only the panelists will be visible. At the end of the presentation, Lauren will be taking questions from some of the audience, so you may use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording this webinar, and we'll send you the recording in the next few days for your reference. And now, I'd like to welcome NIAF board member, Joe Gulino. Joe?
Thanks, Gabriella. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Gulino, and I'm honored to present Your Italian Passport, the 1948 Law, Seeking Dual Citizenship through the Tribunal in Rome, a virtual event brought to you by the National Italian American Foundation. NIAF is a membership-based, nonpartisan and nonprofit organization. Founded in 1975, NIAF's mission is to preserve the Italian American heritage and culture, promote and inspire a positive image and legacy of Italian Americans, and strengthen and empower ties between the United States and Italy. We are based in Washington, D.C., and very excited to host virtual events, because now we can share information and engage with Italian Americans from all over as never before. All of our past and future webinars on genealogy, dual citizenship, Italian language and culture, government affairs and beyond can be found on our homepage at www.niaf.org. As a result of the pandemic, NIAF's traditional source of revenue is on pause, so we thank you for joining us tonight and supporting our mission. And with that, I would like to introduce dual citizenship expert and attorney, Lauren Hopkins, who will be presenting tonight's webinar. She is from Your Italian Passport, a US-based company offering comprehensive services for Italian Americans seeking to obtain Italian dual citizenship. Whether you are hoping to determine if you are eligible for Italian citizenship, in need of professional review of your application materials, or looking for a company to handle your application from start to finish, Your Italian Passport is here to help. Lauren is an Italian-American practicing attorney, licensed in New York and Florida and Washington, D.C., and has a thorough understanding of the ins and outs of the Italian dual citizenship application process, including the collection of U.S. vital records, the research and procurement of naturalization documents, and the affixation of apostilles required for the recognition of foreign records by the Italian government. Lauren is also a longtime friend and supporter of the foundation. For years, Your Italian Passport has been offering discounts for its services to NIAF members. So after this session, if you want to hire Your Italian Passport, make sure to become a NIAF member first to get the discount. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lauren Hopkins. Good evening, Lauren. Buonasera, benvenuta.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Joe. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren Hopkins and my company is Your Italian Passport. Joe's intro said most of what I would typically be telling you, but a little bit of background about myself. So despite my, as I always say, deceivingly sounding British last name, I am indeed also an Italian American, just like yourselves, on my mother's side. I am a dual citizen, having gone through this process, the one that you're considering embarking on, several years ago, along with my mom. And during that process, we learned that these rather opaque waters of Italian citizenship are ripe for assisting others as they navigate them. So hence Your Italian Passport was born. And since then, we have helped hundreds, if not thousands of people through this process. Tonight's webinar, for those of you who were perhaps in attendance at the last session, will specifically be about the 1948 rule, and perhaps all of you, or at least I hope, have realized that you may fall into that category, and tonight I hope to answer all of the questions that you may have about that process, so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not to move forward with your application. So thank you, everyone.
All right, so Lauren, and you mentioned you went through the process with your mother as well. What does the Italian law state about a woman's right to pass citizenship on to her children?
Great question. So that's really where we begin. Italian citizenship law starts in 1912, and the 1912 law stated that men and only men could pass citizenship to their children. That remained the law until 1948. What happened in 1948? Italy became a republic, and Italy's constitution was promulgated. Under that constitution, it was established that men and women were to have equal rights. And one of the rights that women obtained in 1948 was the right to pass citizenship to their children, just as men did. Now, the catch there is that it began with, on that date, January 1st, 1948. So as the law currently reads, women can pass citizenship to their children just like men can, so long as those children were born on or after January 1st of 1948.
So that seems like a great modern approach to allow both men and women to pass the citizenship on to their children, however, not retroactive to those prior to the Italian Constitution. What effect
That's
did
exactly right.
And so how have we been able to get around this? I understand that there was a Supreme Court ruling in 2009 in Italy that has had some effect on this strange scenario.
Yes, that's exactly right. You are correct to point out that though it equalizes things for men and women moving forward from 1948, the law did not grandmother, as I like to say, itself, and so did not permit the children born to women prior to that date to be recognized as citizens. What changed in 2009 was that thankfully the Supreme Court of Italy accepted a challenge to the constitutionality of this, the fact that that this law was not grandmothered back to include the children born prior to 1948. And so they considered that challenge and found that this indeed was a violation of the constitutional principles of Italy, and said this is a discrimination against women, and thus it must be that men and women can equally pass citizenship to their children regardless of the dates of birth of those children.
Okay, so we'll have to talk about how this process works. I think the title of our session probably gives away the answer to my next question, but can the applications for Italian citizenship, iura sanguinis, that involve the woman then passing the citizenship onto a child born before this key 1948 date that you mentioned, can those applications be processed in the normal way through Italian embassies and consulates?
Short answer is no. So we have this interesting dichotomy of, we have a Supreme Court case that says men and women must be treated equally and should be able to pass citizenship to their children regardless of the child's date of birth. But we also have the law as it still reads on the books. This might seem a little bit strange to us Americans who understand that when our Supreme Court makes a ruling, if there is a law, be it local, state, federal, that is not in accordance with that ruling, officials must amend that law to bring it into accordance with the Supreme Court's finding. Not necessarily the case in Italy. And so we have this situation where the law as it reads on the books is different than the case law as set forth by the Italian Supreme Court. What that means in practical terms is that the Italian consulate officials in the US and throughout the world are powerless to override the law as it reads on the books. They must follow that code in assessing the citizenship applications brought before them. So only a court, only a judge has the power to override it and to grant citizenship to someone whose family tree involves a woman attempting to pass citizenship to a child born before 1948.
Okay, so that means if we're in this situation, we have our only recourse is to the courts. Lauren, we're both lawyers. We know how the court process works. It's not always straightforward. It's not always quick. What does the Italian court process entail for people who find themselves in this situation?
Sure. So essentially, anyone going through this process in the court system is essentially filing a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of this 1948 rule, as we say, and setting forth, just as the 2009 case did, that they are being discriminated against and that they should be eligible for citizenship just like they would be if they were pursuing citizenship through, for instance, their paternal line. So what is going on is the filing of a lawsuit in the form of a petition that sets forth these same challenges to the law. The legal arguments really don't change, and establishing that this individual petitioner's family history is such that they would be recognized as a citizen, but for the fact that there is a woman in their line who cannot pass citizenship to a child born before 1948. So in short, it's the filing of a petition in the courts.
So then someone in this situation needs to hire an Italian attorney to handle the petition and make the arguments to the court for them.
Absolutely. You must have an Italy barred attorney. And to be clear, I am a dual citizen, for instance. I am an Italian and I am also an American, and I am a US attorney. I am not an Italy barred attorney. What you need in order to file a case in Italian court, which has exclusive jurisdiction over these matters, is the assistance of an Italy barred attorney. Absolutely.
And so what criteria do you look for in trying to select those lawyers? It's a very narrow specialty, and I'm not sure if you know how many cases there are, how many petitions are brought in a year or regularly. So there must not be so many lawyers who are skilled at this as well. What are you looking for in finding that lawyer?
Sure. You are correct that there are not that many attorneys handling this, to my knowledge. There are a handful of them for sure. Some things to consider. There is one court in Italy that is authorized to handle cases of this nature, and that is the Tribunal in Rome. So something to consider is perhaps locating an attorney who is Rome-based, as it will be easier for him or her to access the court, and who also has a background practicing there. As many of us know, it is often the case with all things Italian that things move more quickly, for instance, when you, depending on who you know and not necessarily the merits of the case. So in my personal opinion, I think it is invaluable to have someone with experience practicing in Rome who may very well have a personal, if not professional, relationship with the judges who will be reviewing these materials. Something else to consider. So the application itself consists of the same documentation that would otherwise have been presented at the consulate. The Italy barred attorney, the attorney in Rome or wherever, is not necessarily going to offer any assistance in the collection of the records, the affixing of the apostilles, the translation of the materials into Italian. They will expect the applicant, the petitioner, to provide them with these materials in a format that can be immediately filed with the court. So something else to consider is, if that's not something you're prepared to take on yourself, does this attorney that you're looking to work with in Rome or in Italy have a relationship with a professional here in the US or elsewhere that can assist you in the building of the application? Also something to consider. And lastly, price. This is not an inexpensive process, as you might imagine. It comes with the cost. There is much labor involved, and it does come with attorney's fees, as you might imagine them to be. Shop it around. Make sure that you're not being quoted something that is out of touch with what other attorneys offering a similar service are quoting you. So 3 things to consider: possibly an attorney in Rome, someone to assist you with the building of the application itself, and be mindful of the costs that are being quoted to you.
So compiling the information you just mentioned is sort of the same research, the same information that is needed for someone presenting their citizenship application to the consulate, assuming they don't have this 1948 issue. But the final step, rather than the consulate, is the local lawyer in Italy presenting that petition to the tribunal in Rome.
That's exactly right. So the materials, the documents, the records themselves that would otherwise have been presented at the consulate are the exhibits that accompany the petition, which is filed in the court. That petition will be reviewed by a judge or a panel of judges, and the documentation reviewed by them. And what the court will do is issue an order recognizing the petitioner or petitioners as citizens, just as the consulate here would have issued a letter recognizing someone as a citizen.
And that comes with the same concerns or risks that we've talked about in some of the previous sessions on having documents that are not consistent, issues of name changes or misspellings or lack of connection between the petitioner in this case and the original Italian ancestor. But in this situation, they're just being reviewed by the judge rather than by a consular official.
Absolutely. So in theory, the review should be the same scrutiny should be applied to the records as would be applied at the consulates. This is one benefit of going through this process, is that it has been our finding that the judges, unlike the consulate officials who can apply real scrutiny to the records and can be quite nitpicky about discrepancies, the judges, in our experience, bringing many cases through this court process, are often less concerned with minor discrepancies in the records. So that is something to be less concerned about than applying at the consulate. In terms of the legal aspect of the case and whether or not there is something to be concerned about in terms of the legal arguments, just know that the same legal arguments are being made as were made in the 2009 case that was ruled upon by the Italian Supreme Court. So there's no new legal issue being considered. Yes, the court does have the freedom to not find along with the holding of the Italian Supreme Court. They are not bound by that, but that is in over 90% of cases, if not closer to 100%. They are not making new legal findings. In fact, they are simply applying the facts of the petitioner's case to the established law.
So when the petitioner is presenting this documentation and the petition, which family members are they including? How broad do you go, or how many generations do you go? And does each person need to present a separate petition?
Sure. It's my recommendation that as many people in your family who wish to be recognized as citizens be included in the petition. And that is for two reasons. Number one, there is mixed guidance coming out of the consulates as to whether a sibling, a child, a cousin can piggyback off of a court order issued in the name of one family member and appear at the consulate and say, I am the brother of, the sister of, the son of, etc. This person who was recognized, who had their citizenship recognized by court order, I am here today to present simply documents that link me to that person as well as a copy of the court order. Some consulates have advised me they would honor that. Others have advised that they will not honor that. It is my advice that you not take that risk of finding out after the fact that a family member cannot be recognized by the consulate based upon a court order in your name. Instead, include that family member in the petition. Multiple family members can be included in a single petition. And for instance, the attorney that we pair with in Rome to bring cases of this nature, the fees for adding additional family members are nominal. So please do not find yourself in a position of needing to have a new petition filed with the court and the costs and time associated with that.
Right, you mentioned this is not an inexpensive proposition to go through with the whole petition process. Better to just add additional parties to the single petition than having everyone file
Correct.
Separately. Yeah,
absolutely.
What is the timeline for this process? And since this is a court petition, does anyone actually need to be present in Italy? Does the petitioner need to be present in Italy at any point during the process? And I know everyone's hoping your answer is yes.
Great question. We'll start with the timeline. In general, I tell everyone embarking on this process, think of this as at least a 3-year journey. We'll break that down into parts. The first portion of which will be the building of the application. Whether you're doing that yourself, you're collecting all of the records, you're affixing the apostilles, you are translating everything into Italian, or you have hired a professional organization to assist you with that. That is what will first be done. That will take a minimum of 6 months. It could take the better part of a year. At that point, those materials are sent to the attorney in Italy, a petition drafted and filed, and a first hearing date set. Those hearing dates are not issued immediately upon the filing. It can be 6 months or more before the first hearing date comes around. And in light of the COVID-19 closures earlier this spring, we are finding that that delay is even longer. At that first hearing, the attorney will answer any questions that the judge or panel of judges has about the application, which were not readily apparent from the written submission itself, and a second hearing date during which the order recognizing citizenship is to be issued will be set. That period of time between the first hearing and the second hearing can be excruciatingly long. Sometimes it is more than a year, and nothing is happening with your case during that period of time. Moreover, that second hearing can be reset for no other reason than the judge needs more time. These judges are juggling very large dockets, and often they have not had a chance to address a matter despite a very lengthy period of time since the first hearing. So in short, just know that you're embarking on a long journey. Much of it will be spent being very patient and simply waiting. 3 years is a good estimate for the average case.
And how does that compare then to the timing, if you can remind us, for those who are just submitting their documentation through the consulates?
It may in fact be shorter. So for those of you who have any familiarity with scheduling an appointment at the consulates here, you know that the wait list at most of them, if not all, is at least 18 months. 2 years tends to be closer to reality. That's on the front end. That's just waiting to get into the consulate to present your materials. On the back end, there is a wait while the consulate processes your granted application. That processing is what must take place before they issue your citizenship letter. That can be as much as, under the new law, up to 4 years. 2 years if you're applying if you're in a certain category of eligibility. That's the law. What we're finding in practice is that most consulates are not exceeding the 2-year limit. I have yet to see one do it and to insist upon having that additional 2 years now afforded to them under law. Some are doing it an even shorter amount of time. But to answer your question, 3 years tends to be the average for the consulate process. So you're not really losing time going through the court system. So don't feel as though, oh, if only I could apply at the consulate. You're really not missing out.
Okay. Right. So you talked a little bit before about the likelihood of success, how the documents are reviewed by the court. When we think of a court hearing and making a petition, we think maybe also there would be someone opposing that petition. Is there any government opposition or any party that would come in and oppose that petition? And how do the courts, how do the judges handle that?
Yes, and I also realized I forgot to answer your question about whether you can be in attendance. So we'll address both of those.
Yeah.
Yes. So the opponent, the theoretical opponent, is the Ministry of the Interior, who does have the right to oppose the petition. In practice, they are not issuing any sort of objection to these matters. They are not any court, and no live person is showing up at any of the hearings. That is not to say they are not permitted to do so. That is just simply the practice that has been in place for many years. So yes, theoretically, there could be opposition. You don't have any reason to, in a practical sense, expect that to take place in your case. In terms of being there, yes, you can be present in Italy for one or more of these, of the aspects of this process. You do not have to be. The Italy attorney can represent you in full without your presence there. You are welcome to attend, however. I have been there to attend hearings in the Italian court. I should warn everyone, it lacks a little bit of fanfare. So if you're picturing, yes, I want to hear my family tree case heard in Italian Supreme Court with judges in beautiful robes and fabulous wigs sitting on high. No, that is not what you are going to experience. It's a much more humble court. That doesn't mean it's not a wonderful thing to attend and a very educational experience, but it would be understandable if you elected to pass.
Well, and you mentioned before sort of the uncertainty about the hearing dates and the risk, not even just in the current COVID situation, but in general, the risk of those hearings being postponed almost on a whim. Great to go to Italy to attend the hearing, but there's a risk that hearing might not actually take place when you're there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So just as with almost all things Italian, go into it with some flexibility, knowing that, all right, I will be happy with my trip, even if the hearing doesn't take place. That can occur. So be careful if planning a trip to attend your hearing.
Right. So then assume the court goes through the process, hears the petition and approves it. They issue an order then granting the citizenship. And I think you talked a little bit earlier then about what happens with that order and how the petitioner then takes it to turn it into actual Italian citizenship.
Yes, so the order itself makes the petitioner a fully recognized Italian citizen under the law. Once that is issued, there is a res judicata process. It's a 30-day window where the Ministry of the Interior, as we talked about, the potential opponent, has the right to appeal the order. In practice, this happens without any sort of objection or appeal from the ministry. Once that 30-day window closes, the order is official. It can no longer be challenged. A certified copy should be provided to all petitioners. And the vital records that accompany the petition, some of those must be registered in the petitioner's ancestral town, namely the petitioner's birth records. So that must be done either by mail. Some comune, some municipal offices will agree to receive and register these materials based on a mailed submission. Others will require an in-person appearance by the attorney or someone else to physically drop off the records and request their registration. Once that is done, proof of the registration of the birth records will also be provided by the commune or municipal office. And it's those two materials, a certified copy of the court order recognizing citizenship and proof of the petitioner's birth record having been registered in the ancestral town, that the applicant needs in order to go to their consulate back here in the United States to apply, for instance, for a passport.
Okay, so that's the big question. I remember going through the process myself, went through the process at the consulate, and once everything had been finalized, I wanted nothing more than to submit that application and get the passport. What is the process then for obtaining the passport once the citizenship has been approved by the court and all of the registrations at the local commune have been made?
Absolutely. So at that point, you're in the same track as someone who applied for citizenship via the consulate. You have your order recognizing citizenship, you have the proof that your birth record has been registered in your ancestral town, and now you can book a passport appointment using the consulate that covers your area of residence, their electronic calendar, to book a passport appointment. On that date, you would go in with your 2 passport size photos, payment for the passport booklet, the application, your certified order recognizing citizenship, and proof of your birth record having been registered in your ancestral town. And with those materials, you will be issued a passport and you will walk out with it that day.
So this is a process that sounds kind of daunting initially when you talk about having to request that the court acknowledge the petition based on a Supreme Court decision that interprets the 1948 Constitution. But the way you've described it, it's very straightforward. If the documentation is in place and you can demonstrate, as you would, as we did in the normal consular process, demonstrate that connection, the process is not so complicated or so much more time consuming than it might seem.
That's correct. This should not feel intimidating to anyone that finds themselves in this category of eligibility. It is not the end of the road. This is absolutely possible. And like you said, in terms of timing, not much changes. There should be no fear that your case will be denied for a legal reason. If your case otherwise meets the criteria regarding citizenship, for instance, your ancestors' naturalization is not a bar to your eligibility, you can proceed confidently, that knowing that your application will be granted by the Italian court in Rome, and you can be a citizen just like someone applying at the consulates here.
Do you have examples, or do you know of cases where those petitions have been denied? And is there an appeals process to a higher level court in Italy if that petition has been denied?
I do not personally know of any cases that have been denied. That's how infrequent that is. We have
a positive sign.
Knock on wood, but we have a 100% success rate with this, not because we are so fantastic, but because the courts are following the law of the Supreme Court without issue. So yes, there naturally, there would be, as there is with any lawsuit, there is an appellate process that you can go through should your case be denied. And it is absolutely possible. We cannot predict every scenario. These are humans, these judges. It is possible that one may make a finding that is not consistent with the Supreme Court ruling and with other cases that have come since. But the vast majority, bordering on 100% of cases, are going through this process without issue.
It's comforting that you can't think of an example of one that's been denied, and maybe that also speaks to the ability to compile the documentation and to make sure that you have all of the sufficient documentation, and things like you mentioned, the naturalization date is not otherwise a bar to applying for the citizenship.
Yes, I strongly encourage everyone going through this process, make sure that you have dotted all I's and crossed all T's in terms of your documentation, whether that is to simply hire someone who is responsible for those things, or to rely on information available on various websites, including our own, to make sure that what you have built does that for you, because the Italy-based attorney is not necessarily in a position to know that something is missing.
So this is a a topic that has a lot of interest from our participants. I'd like to remind anyone who has questions that you can enter them in the Q&A box below. And it seems, from what I can see here, the participants have been quite active in sending their questions, which Gabriela has continued to monitor for us. So I'd like to turn back to you, Gabriela, to respond to some of the viewers' questions.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Lauren. So our first question comes from Fred Gardafe, a great friend of ours. I have a grandfather who passed his citizenship to my mother. My grandmother died before becoming a U.S. citizen. Does this mean I need to hire an Italian attorney?
Gabriela, did I understand this correctly? That Fred's grandfather was Italy born and passed citizenship to Fred's mother?
Yes, to my mother. Her mother, his grandmother, died before becoming a U.S. citizen.
Okay, just breaking this down into parts. So it seems like we may be talking about two different ancestors, grandfather and grandmother. I think the question that may be, that needs to be clarified is this. So this 1948 law and this rule applies whether you're seeking, whether the woman in your family tree line is your Italy-born ancestor or an intermediate ancestor. So as two different scenarios which may be at play here. If grandfather passed citizenship to mother and mother then passed it to you, but you are born before January 1st of 1948, you are in the Italian court track. Similarly, if grandmother is your source of citizenship and your parent is born before January 1st of 1948, you are also in the Italian court track. So it is not exclusively when you are seeking citizenship from a woman born in Italy. It can come from grandfather down through a woman at some point in the chain. If that woman is attempting to pass citizenship to a child born before 1948, you are in the Italian court track.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. And actually, Fred had a follow-up question. Should I add my two brothers and sister and all of our children, which are 7, to my petition? Or do my children automatically become citizens if I am approved?
Minor children are a possible exception to inclusion on the petition. So because they would never need to appear at the consulate in order to have their citizenship recognized. Rather, registration of a minor child's birth record by a citizen parent at the consulate has the effect of recognizing a minor child as a citizen. Minor children, so long as they will still be minors when you have your citizenship order and can then go into the consulate and say, I'm here for my passport. I also want to register my minor children's birth records. You should have no problem. Minor children, if they are very young and they will still be minors for several years, do not have to be included in the petition. But any adult and any child who will turn 18 during this process should be included in the petition.
Okay. And speaking of petitions, Cheryl La Corsiere asked, does the petitioner need to be present at the hearing?
No, again, you do not have to go to Italy for any portion of this process. You can be represented entirely by the Italian attorney that you hired to file your petition and argue it on your behalf. That said, I would be hard pressed to find an Italian attorney who would not welcome the chance to meet you and to accompany you to court for presentation of your petition.
Okay, great. Our next question comes from Peter De Bartolo. He says, thank you for hosting this at the New York Consulate or at the Rome Tribunal. Is there any problem if some documents have English name, i.e. Peter, and other documents have same name but in Italian, come Pietro, like Pietro? Also,
Sure.
Do apostilles expire once you have them on a document?
First question, so discrepancies can be an issue in both applications submitted to the consulate and applications submitted to the court. as I mentioned, it is our experience that the judges, those reviewing the court petitions, are far less concerned with minor discrepancies, particularly something as widely accepted as the Americanization of a first name, like Pietro to Peter. I would be surprised to see a consulate take issue with that, and it would utterly shock me to see the court take an issue with that and require it to be amended. Now, the second question, remind me.
Do the apostilles expire?
Yes, thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, no. Once a record has its apostille affixed to it, you should have no problems whatsoever. Records can become too old to receive an apostille, but an apostilled record should not be denied by the consulate or by the court for having been apostilled X number of years ago.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. An anonymous attendee asked if your parents were born in Italy and renounced their citizenship to become naturalized Americans at respective ages of 17 and 25. Is there any chance that they can become, that their children still can become citizens?
So to clarify for the listeners, this is not an example of an Italian court case, but let's answer it anyway. So prior to 1992, there was no such thing as dual citizenship. So those that came to the US and elected to become naturalized citizens automatically lost their Italian citizenship. If your parent or any ancestor, if your parent, will stay there, did that prior to your birth, yes, that person is not a viable source of citizenship for you. That being said, there is an avenue which you can follow in becoming an Italian citizen, and that is to go through the Italian naturalization process. The big hurdle there is that one must first establish themselves as a resident in Italy. The bad news is this, typically for American citizens, that period of residency is 10 years, which can, for most people, be enough to say, I cannot do this. For those whose citizenship would be, who have a parent or a grandparent as their Italian ancestor, who are so closely related to an Italian person that it is a parent or grandparent relationship, that residency period is cut to 3 years. So down from 10 to 3 years, it is still possible. I do work with folks in assisting them in establishing their residency, and this is something that we can discuss via telephone consultation, for example. But there is an avenue, it's the naturalization avenue.
Wonderful. This is, I think, a pretty unique question from Suzanne Angioli. My grandmother was born in La Spezia in 1888, but was considered illegitimate because her parents were not married. Can I use her for dual citizenship?
Yes. So a few issues there. So a woman born in 1888 is absolutely when her child will have been born before January 1st of 1948. That is undoubtedly the case. So you are in the Italian court process because she cannot pass citizenship to that child. Only the court can recognize that. Now, the absence of a marriage record for that grandmother's parents may become an issue. So there is a presumption. So a woman born in 1888 was only inheriting citizenship from her father. There is a presumption of paternity when there is a marriage between the father and mother of a child. There is not that presumption of paternity in the absence of a marriage record. My advice would be to make absolutely certain that there does not exist a marriage record. I talk to a lot of folks, and often there can be family lore that things were a certain way. And then when you go digging, you find, oh, lo and behold, there are in fact records here. I would absolutely confirm with La Spezia or any other comune in which the parents of the grandmother were born to make sure that there does not exist a marriage record between them. You may find that one does, and that would alleviate this issue.
Interesting. Lauren, we're getting a lot of questions about just the general range of costs of what people are looking at. Could you offer some insight on that?
Sure. So the attorney that we have paired with in Rome, his name is Marco De Fazzi. His firm is Studio Legale De Fazzi. He charges, to be frank, he charges 6,000 euros for this process. No small amount of money here. In my research of other attorneys offering similar services, this is quite competitive. There are some who are charging more. There are some who are charging slightly less. This seems to fall right within the range of what at this point in time.
Great, great, thank you. Let me pick a couple more. Sorry, we have about 250 questions.
I see that at the bottom of the screen. Take your time.
Sorry, I'm trying to go through them as quickly as I can. So if your mother was born prior to 1948, can she pass on citizenship? If your mother was born prior to 1948, can she pass on citizenship? And if the answer is no, can you get citizenship from a grandfather? This is from Diana DiCenzo.
This is a common confusion of the legal issue. So it is not, the imperative date is not the mother's year of birth. It is the date of birth of the child that the woman is attempting to pass citizenship to. So mom can be born in 1936. If you are born in 1960, no problem whatsoever. That is not a court case. You can apply for citizenship derived from your mother right here at the consulates in the US. The question to ask is, when I see a woman in my family chain, in my family tree line, what is the year of birth of her child that is relevant to my family history?
Okay, great. And Lauren, can you talk about the process people would go through if they would want to consider hiring your Italian passport for a consultation for dual citizenship? What's the
Sure,
process
absolutely.
like?
So what I encourage everyone to do is to start by reviewing the information on our website. It is intended to give you the information that you need to determine your eligibility, the costs of our services, they are not hidden, and to give you a sense of who we are. And then for anyone interested in moving forward with us, we begin with a telephone consultation, which can be ordered from the website, the cost of which is always applied as a credit in full towards services purchased. So that call is essential. We will go over every aspect of your eligibility, what to expect in terms of the consular process that you're embarking on, the Italian court process that you are embarking on. If you do not know whether you are eligible, I will research that for you during our call. So all questions should be answered so that you can make a decision that you are happy and confident about.
Okay, great. Thank you for walking us through that process. Last question, because I think this is a pretty unique situation. Greg Raymond asks, is there any change in the process for children or grandchildren of war brides from World War II that went to America after 1945?
So seeking citizenship through a woman, I think what Greg may be getting at is there a loss of Italian citizenship because the Italian-born woman has married a foreign man?
Correct.
So that also went out the window in terms of law. That changed in 1948. Now, World War II brides would, in large part, have married prior to that. This is also something that can be challenged. This was to have been eliminated as a bias against women as well. So yes, that is not a bar to seeking citizenship. The fact that your Italy-born mother, grandmother, whoever the woman is, married a foreign citizen prior to 1948. That is no longer a bar to citizenship.
Okay, great. Well, Lauren, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our our large audience tonight on the 1948 law and the dual citizenship process.
I did think of one other question that I get somewhat regularly that I think is important to address. Folks ask all the time, do we expect the Italian Parliament to make a change to the law that would thus eliminate the need to go through the Italian court system? The short answer is, I have no idea. I don't know why they haven't done it so far, but we are 11 years since the Supreme Court decision, and the Italian Parliament has elected, whether affirmatively because they don't want to or simply because this is not a priority, I don't know, to not change the law. As current political matters, the current political climate in Italy is, in my mind, not one in which we can expect this in the near future. As folks may know, for instance, the language requirement for spousal citizenship was added just in December of 2018. So there is sort of that tenor to what is going on with citizenship law in Italy. We keep our ear to the ground in terms of, do we expect any negative changes which may make folks who are currently eligible ineligible, or to make this process more challenging than it already is? We keep a close ear to the ground about those issues. We do not see that coming at this time, but more importantly, I do not see this as a climate in which we can expect the Italian Parliament to take this issue up and change the law on the books. But to the extent that this message gets out there that people are truly interested in seeking their citizenship in this way, and that this burden on the court system in Italy could be eliminated by codifying the Italian Supreme Court's decision and thus putting this type of case back in the consular system, I hope they hear us. We will keep you posted on any changes.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, again, something that might be so discouraging when you hear you have to go through this process. But Lauren, as you've explained so far, it's manageable. Obviously, we would all prefer to be able to go through the consular system. Whether that will change, I think I agree with your assessment, but again, you've described what could be a very difficult and complicated process might not really be so. It's just a different route to get to the same conclusion.
Absolutely, Joe. So perhaps that's a great note to close on, which is, don't be afraid. Do not abandon your dream of Italian citizenship simply because your citizenship is derived, it comes through a woman at some point in time. This is possible. There are professionals out there who can assist you with this. Your dream can become a reality. It's just a matter of assessing whether this is a cost you can take on and a timeline that you can endure. But it is possible, so don't be discouraged.
And so it's great we've had so much interest from all of the viewers this evening, so many questions. Thanks, Gabriella, for monitoring those for us and choosing some to keep the conversation going with Lauren. Of course, I want to thank you, Lauren, for sharing your expertise on the 1948 law and seeking dual citizenship through the Tribunal of Rome. On behalf of the National Italian American Foundation, I would like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this evening. We hope you've enjoyed this session and you've learned a lot in the process. As a reminder, the session was recorded and a link to download the video will be sent to you in the next few days. Lastly, don't forget to sign up for our next webinar with Lauren on August 20th, when we will explore spousal citizenship. More details available on our website at www.niaf.org. Thank you again. Grazie, buona serata a tutti.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you to NIAF. Thank you, Gabriella. Buona serata.
Buonasera a tutti.